What if the institutions designed to help us understand the human psyche are actually afraid of them? Hosted by Dr. Michael Montgomery, this podcast explores the uncomfortable questions. Together, we'll examine how the mental health systems meant to heal us instead perpetuate cycles of dependency. Welcome to the Psychophobia podcast.
My name is Dr. Michael Montgomery, and I am very, very excited to be talking to the illustrious Gary Allen. I'm not going to reveal too much about you as we start, because the format is very simple. I like to dive in, and then maybe 15 minutes in, I'll get to who you are and why we should be talking to you in the first place. How are you feeling?
I'm good. It's great to see you, and I'm really looking forward. I'm excited actually about this conversation because, as you said, you're not revealing much. So I'm curious as well as to where we're going to go.
Yeah, me too. So I think there are different reasons for doing the podcast, none least of which to try and get this message out to do with psychophobia. But I have had many experiences with people where I'm in a dialogue and I just go, oh God, I'd love to record that because something special seems to be happening. Without getting into your bio, what I would say is you're probably in the top 10 people that I respect most in the world. Just you as an individual, who you are, but also the incredible work that you do and what you've taught me, particularly in two areas. One, in the area of alcohol, not how to drink it, but how to change one's relationship to it. And then the other thing is groups. So, people who have seen me do groups may not know that you had a huge influence on how to do that in a modern context and also on Zoom. So perhaps we could get into that. But the statistics on alcohol use in the Western world are staggering. So in some circles, they seem to be coming down with some of the perhaps younger generation and some demographics, but in others, it's actually going up. So tell me what your thoughts are on being alcohol-free, because that's where we initially met, in the sort of alcohol-free community.
First of all, is around this time of year, it's a little bit of disbelief in that, in exactly a week's time, it'll be 8 years.
Wow.
Since I had drinks, and I can't really believe that. Every time the date comes around. Being alcohol-free has changed my life, utterly, completely. And it changed my career, and changed me physically and mentally, emotionally, and in every other way, really. I think it's probably the secret that nobody knows, in that being alcohol free, even a little bit of it was impacting me. And the thing about the Western world, as you talked about there, is that, or maybe even worldwide, is that and this is where I started, is that your relationship with alcohol was either black or it's white. It was a healthy relationship with alcohol, or everything was dangerous and damaging and life-threatening and catastrophic. And I was neither of those. And but it didn't sit well with me that, my alcohol intake from a reasonably early age, from maybe my mid-20s. And because I thought I was, maybe even subconsciously at that stage, I was the guy that was speeding up as everybody else was kind of steady or slowing down. And I would only ever have gone out a couple of times in the weekends with my brothers, who I'm very close to. But So it was only then in 2017 that I really took hold of it and found another way, and found all these people, you included actually, who were kind of in a similar position of kind of in the middle. And that was within another organization that I joined called One Year No Beer. And where we met, and where their philosophy is of changing your relationship with alcohol. And through which I did, I first started with a 90-day challenge, or a 30-day, I can't even remember, and I did 100 days, and then I went, I remember my wife saying to me, well, you might as well do a year now, and I did, and kind of, I've never looked back since. And genuinely, I think there's one, I look at alcohol now kind of as with a curious mindset. Now, when I ask the question, which I do consciously and subconsciously, of, okay, do I want to drink today? And if the answer is maybe, which very rarely is, then I ask myself, what's the point? What am I trying to, I'm with a curious mindset of actually, what am I trying to gain here? And to me, it's a transaction. And for me, for the last 8 years, the gain isn't even close to big enough for what it's going to cost me. Because one of the reasons that there is such an issue with alcohol in the world is that it works. It does what it says in the tin. It will do what you want it to do, but except the consequences then become, to my mind, infinitely greater when it gets to a place that's unhealthy. So that's the decision I make every day, subconsciously now these days, because it's kind of automatic. But you're never going to hear me say I'm never drinking again. It's not a valid conversation for me.
So how hard was that transition from, which many people are doing? You mentioned January, they're doing a dry January. How much of a transition was it for you from a month to a year? Because that for many people sounds like a leap.
Yeah, well, and it is a leap if you do it in that way. But one of the methodologies, or one of the phrases that is used in other ways of stopping drinking or changing your relationship with alcohol, is one day at a time. And I'm a real fan of that attitude. But it has to have the right energy around it. And what I mean by that is, you can look at one day at a time, and it is looked at in some other, areas of, well, I'm not capable of thinking more, I'm doing more than one day, so let me just do today. I don't see it like that. I absolutely believe that, I'm capable of doing 2 days and 3 days, and everyone else I speak to is capable of doing 2 days and 3 days and 4 days, etc., etc. But we only have today to state the obvious. We're never going to have tomorrow, and we're never going to have yesterday. So just doing it one day at a time, and knowing and accepting that choose your hard, because it's going to be difficult. You're going to have cravings, and in the early days, but when you employ the whole idea of habit, a consistent behavior that yields a consistent result, which is my definition of a habit. And when for me, it was that. It wasn't, if we want to use the A word of addiction, it wasn't, if I kept going, maybe we would have gone to those places, but it wasn't that. It was something that I did, and it just became a bit more habitual than I would have liked it to be. And if I changed my habit and went through the hard cravings, and using things like meditation, using things like journaling, using things like exercise or whatever, using kind of other stuff, and just or maybe even just sitting with the pain, or sitting with the discomfort, then I found that an incredibly empowering thing. And when you got that done on a Monday, then what do you need to do? You'll need to do it again on a Tuesday and again on a Wednesday. And and then, you know, you're 7 days down the road, and then maybe you're 10 days down the road. And also, you know, what happens at that point is that when you get a good chunk of time under your belt, that becomes a tool, because I'm not giving that away. I'm not giving those last 50 days away. So that became a real motivator to me, because my past is in IT. So I've kind of got a more logical brain. So numbers appeal to me. So I wasn't about to give those, you know, that chunk of time away, which got me down the road of getting to 100 days and go, I don't want to give this up. I don't want to go back there. Now, does it mean that it's all the rest of it is going to be easy? No, it doesn't. Because nobody's promising easy. But it's just the gain. It is really, to use the cliche, it is the gift that keeps on giving.
I love that. So you covered so much. So the first association I had was when we met. I came up with the glass. So I bought pebbles. So every day I decided to not drink. I would put a pebble in, so you could see those days that you talk about fill up. There was like a visual reminder and also a ritual. But I wanted to go back and put this into context, because I think there's a real huge story, because I felt when we met, we were part of a sort of emerging movement, and that movement had flipped the whole idea of alcohol on its head, where it moved away from this idea of there was something wrong to actually there's to be something gained, not something to be given up, but something to be experienced. And, you know, just to share myself, I decided to stop alcohol altogether on the 1st of January 2024. So I'm on my second year, and that would be the longest I went without drinking since I was 14. People might have picked up that I'm from Belfast and you're from Dublin, and I think we share a culture where it was just part of the fabric. You know, it was like water, births, deaths, funerals, you know, workplaces. It was such an acceptable thing, but it was also this feeling that this was the norm, right? And many of the things that we have shared, I've passed on to people. And one of the things that people often find liberating is when I say to them, alcohol use isn't the norm. Sobriety is the norm, right? Now, that's very hard to do in heavy drinking cultures. I noticed in America, if I go to an event and I say I'm not drinking, no, it's not like a thing. It's, do you want to drink? No, that's it. Whereas I remember in other sort of heavy drinking environments, you know, the only drug that you have to make an excuse for not doing, right? And I think one of the things that we learned was building the confidence to be able to say no. But in other contexts, you don't have to make an excuse because it's not the norm. And I think when people have that, start to find that self-confidence, it's very important. But the other thing that for me that came out of that movement was really knowledge. So much of my relationship with alcohol, I didn't fully understand because I hadn't been fully informed. And I think you were very diplomatic there without naming the 12-step groups. But the 12-step groups save lives. They have incredible history, but it doesn't work for everyone. And there's a certain paradigm and a certain dogma that it's necessary to sign up to, that if you don't connect with, means it's very difficult. And I think that the movement towards alcohol-free is great. Why don't you try it? Sort of turns that very much on the head. The two are very compatible, but they're quite different. What are your thoughts on that?
The thing that I would say about that, quite simply, is alcohol is not my enemy, and it's about changing your relationship to alcohol. And at the moment I'm ambivalent towards it. I don't care about it. Now, I don't care if other people drink. I don't. It's not a thing, obviously, for me. The people around me, people around me every day, still drink. Now, and as you say, those other 12-step methods have worked for many, many people that I know. But one of the when we start this, and this is, I work as a coach now, and have done for the last number of years, and really, when we're changing any behavior, from something that isn't serving us to something that is, to something better, we're doing it for one of two sets of reasons. And the first set of reasons are always the ones at the beginning. And are your reasons of desperation. That's what I call them. In other words, what you don't want. And that's for you don't want the hangovers, you don't want the family issues, the work issues, or whatever it might be. And when you get away from the behavior that you want to change, then, of course, what you still have is this primitive brain who doesn't care, doesn't give a crap about consequences, doesn't understand consequences, just understands survival, just understands safety, really. You're the expert in the room here, so jump in if I'm misrepresenting anything. But that is where, because we've trained it in these behaviors, alcohol being one of them, but not necessarily the only one, or not the only one, then these behaviors get locked in as kind of effective ways of doing whatever they do, numbing or forgetting or relaxing or whatever it is. And so when we do that, and it sees that we've got momentum here, the back brain, the primitive brain sees that we've got momentum here, it'll release. But it still wants to go back. It still wants to go back to these old behaviors. It will take its opportunity and tell you things like, one won't hurt, there was never that bad anyway, you've done very well, you deserve it, you've had a hard day. All of those stories come back. And that's happened to me dozens and dozens and dozens of times before I changed. And that the change was to move on to the second set of reasons. And the second set of reasons are what I call your reasons of inspiration. In other words, what do you want? I remember, I don't remember the date, but I remember the experience of waking up with a bunch of days in, don't know how many it was, maybe it was 50 plus, with energy and clarity, the like of which I'd never experienced in my adult life. And it was a profound experience, because I said to myself from that point, I'm not giving this away. And that's the thing, is that, let's get real. We live in a real busy world. We all got busy lives. So my life didn't change profoundly and, massively positively overnight. But I thought, well, I'm starting with a level playing field here. There was mornings, where I was starting below zero, plenty of them. You could even say most of them. But I was starting with a level playing field here. And I was saying, okay, well, I'm not behind the eight ball when it's waking up. So, okay, that's good. That's good enough for me. I'm not giving that away. So, so those reasons of inspiration, I just built on those a day at a time. And one of the things I always say to people I work with is the difference between me 8 years in and you, beginning this process is zero. In capacity, zero. So, it's just a matter of giving yourself an opportunity. Just give yourself a chance. Giving ourselves a chance to see that energy and clarity. You can have that every day. Now, will you have it every day? No, because we've got life, and like you might feel, physically, mentally under pressure. But at the same time, that's another thing to deal with. But, haven't put myself behind the alcohol 8 ball.
So what I've observed clinically is people have a relationship with alcohol, and often when things get difficult in their life, the relationship with alcohol can change. So, for example, you mentioned numbing. So things are really bad, and I turn to alcohol because I can numb out. The major issue with that is it doesn't select. It numbs out across the board, which means if you decide to stop the numbing, a lot of emotion comes back, not just the very thing that you were trying to numb out, but the reason the drinking increased is often the cause. But what I observe is after a period of time, the alcohol becomes the primary problem. So you can't actually address the underlying things. What happens in sometimes in 12-step is people go and then they focus on alcohol problem, excuse me, but they don't look at the underlying, right? All evidence shows that to treat these two things concurrently, to look at the whys, be it trauma, be it some sort of habitual thing you've got into, to look at them both and to expose them both at the same time is the most effective. But what happens in services is people get directed from one service to the other. So, we can't look at your mental health because you've got an alcohol problem. We can't look at your alcohol problem because you've got mental health, and they get passed. So what I learned very quickly is addressing both at the same time is very, very helpful. But what you allude to is when you stop drinking or change your alcohol use, you're still left with the existential challenges of everyday life. But what is very strong evidence is, alcohol spikes people's depression and anxiety. Right, so it's actually what they think is depression is often fueled by their alcohol use and their alcohol come down. They don't realize that, so that's part of the education piece that I thought was very, very helpful. I have a different relationship with alcohol. I think alcohol after fentanyl is the worst drug on the planet. Right, if alcohol was a guest on the show, I'd punch it in the face because of the carnage. Right, so I think the 12-step puts so much emphasis on the individual. What I learned from my experience in the alcohol-free movement was actually alcohol has serious properties. It's a serious drug. All drugs that have a psychoactive component are serious drugs, and my thing is we do not respect them. Right, so psychiatrists, I'm speaking generally, can prescribe, or PCPs prescribe medication like it's M&Ms, right? Without the respect. So if you take an antipsychotic or take a benzo, if you're experiencing acute anxiety in the short term, a benzo can be wonderful. To be on it every day for a year, that is a whole different thing. So I'm jumping around a little bit, but you made a great point. The hardest thing talking to people about alcohol is the fact that it does do what it says on the tin. You come in from work, you're stressed out. If I have that big glass of wine, instantly, right? However, there is a huge payoff for that glass of wine, health-wise, blood pressure, stress, sleep, etc., etc. What would be wonderful is if you could give people the alcohol-free pill to experience for a day what it would be like in terms of their life and their experience of alcohol-free. But it's so relatable and understandable. If my life is going really, really badly, alcohol becomes a crutch. But we become blinded to the fact that crutch is potentially that becomes the problem. It starts to take. You mentioned you're very humble, which is one of your qualities. You mentioned you're a coach. You're actually one of the top coaches in Ireland, if not the world. But I'm going to introduce the question. Who do you think you are, and why should we be listening to anything that you've got to say in this area? Give us a little bit about your background.
As I said, I spent 30 years in IT. I was born in the west of Ireland, and I still live in the west of Ireland. I'm not from Dublin, so someone that is born in the west of Ireland can't actually ever let that go from earlier on. So I'm just correct, just to throw that in. I live in Galway in the west of Ireland. So I spent 30 years in IT, but I suppose one of the big, maybe inconsequential things now, but one of the things that was tricky about me growing up was that I was born with a disability, so I don't walk, and I never have to any great degree, which I think gave me a really massive advantage in some ways, in that knowledge and reading and learning became very, very important to me very, very early on, because I was brought up on a farm. 2 brothers, and they were out farming with Dad while I was more or less sitting inside reading with my mother, and so that became reading and learning became really, really important really, really quickly. And the reason I say that, and that's the reason why that's kind of relevant, is that I became interested in what I didn't realize later on was personal development. Until very much later on was personal development for the brain. And I think it comes from the fact that things were and are limited physically, but this bit works okay. So I was kind of, I know now, subconsciously determined to make the most of that. Anyway, I went into computers and went for a software engineer, but I kind of went to become a software engineer for a few decades. But the interest in human potential, the power of the human, never really left me, and it just became stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. As did the two thoughts: one, that I'm not really sure I'm in the right job, and secondly, this alcohol thing is kind of getting in my way now. So, as I said, I quit the alcohol in 2018, and pretty much immediately decided that I was going to train to be a coach, and which I did. And I started working, within the 1 year no beer ecosystem in 2019, and that's where we met. But when I did start coaching people, I found, I suppose, it was natural for me. It felt easy. It felt normal, and it felt like where I should be. And I suppose the two things that I will say about myself is that I have a natural ability and a strong ability to hold space for people, but I also have a very, very strong ability to sit with pain without having to change it, without having to kind of advice give or trying to fix people, because there is nothing that I am better at than believing in people before they can believe in themselves, and going along the journey with them, and they will take that belief off me when they're ready. They won't even know they're doing it, but I will be the person to believe in them before they believe in themselves.
So that's really, really powerful. And I think we share that. It's nearly like a trick, isn't it? It's like people who don't believe in themselves, if you can get them to believe you enough, the second they believe in you, you can reflect that back to get them to believe in themselves. Now, you use the term holding space, which I'm not a huge fan of because it's become a bit of a buzzword, but that is what I observed. So the first time I was in a group with you, I was like, wow, this guy, how he holds such a diverse group of vulnerable, often, or at least curious people who don't know each other from all around the world, and gives them time to speak and can hold the whole thing. It was extraordinary to me, and I'd never seen anything like it. I'd been trained in the traditional, sort of group process, psychotherapy groups, and you were able to hold what I would call quite a high intensity group in ways that I'd never seen before, and it's hugely influenced how I work and how I run a group. How did you know how to do that, or was that just a natural thing, or talk to that a little bit?
I wish I knew. Actually, maybe I don't wish I knew. And I suppose, well, I mentioned my disability back a little bit, and I suppose one of the things that comes with that is you have to do things differently. Yeah, I had to live a bit differently. Like there was a pile of times, months in hospitals when I was younger, and just things that were my life, like, but were, difficult for other people. Other people would see them as just really difficult. I spent a good chunk of until I was 14 or 15 in hospitals with operations and stuff like that. So these days you might call it resilience. I don't know what you would call it, but, ability to, get through difficult situations. I don't know what you would call it, but I came out the other end of it, and that gave me I think it gave me an inherent belief in everybody to be able to kind of overcome. And I wasn't, as I say, this was my life. It's very much like, that old story of two fish swimming in the water, and an old fish passes them by and says, "Morning, guys, how's the water?" And they look at each other and go, "What's water?" This was just my water. It's just, and I think, and my interest in humans and my interest in human potential, and what I could see from everybody that was in that room, in those rooms, is potential. And the potential to get to, because remember when I started this, I was a good chunk of time alcohol free. And I really mean it when I said there's nothing special about me. Absolutely nothing. So it was an inherent belief that everybody could get to where they were, to that place. And if they sat with me, whether there was a lot of emotion, and you were in those rooms where there was plenty of emotion, but for some reason that I can't put my finger on, I have no interest in analyzing it, is emotion doesn't freak me out, and really strong emotions doesn't really, it doesn't, it's natural, it's normal. And I had just an ability to see past all of that and into the potential behind it.
I think that is what came across without you actually having to be explicit about it. It felt like here's a space where somebody has the confidence, experience, and presence to reflect back to people that actually it's all okay, and you can do this if this is the way you want to go. I also felt you were incredibly non-judgmental. Right. So whether people drank, didn't drank too much, whatever it was, you were there. You'd be there. You'd be the same. There was no walk of shame, which I think is very important. But also, I think you're under a certain amount of time pressure because I can't remember the numbers, but they could fill up, couldn't they? What was the sort of?
It was about, maybe we'd have up on 20 people for an hour.
Yeah. So if there were insurance companies watching this, they'd be rapping on your door. Hang on a second. You're telling me this guy can hold a group with 20 people and it work? And I'm going, yeah, because I've been there. I wouldn't go personally when I'm working clinically. I would rarely want to go over 6 people in a group. But it was the same. It had all the qualities. Well, I hope it had the qualities and principles that you demonstrated, but it was just on a smaller scale, and it would go much more intensely into things like serious trauma, and none of the groups I ran were alcohol focused. They were all extreme trauma focused, but people in the group also had substance use problems, and I never really talked about the substance use. It was more the focus on the trauma, and the substance use sort of took care of itself, which is quite fascinating in a way. Yeah. But what was offered were places where people could scream. So I've been in a group with 6 people, and 5, I think 4 or 5 of the people had been involuntarily admitted to hospital because they screamed, right? Because the professional didn't like what they were saying. They couldn't hold the scream. So they thought the only way they could hold the scream was to have someone involuntarily hospitalized, or at least, phone an ambulance type situation. I never saw you get that nervous when faced with people who might be in quite vulnerable states. And I heard you say that that comes from a lot of your personal background. You're quite modest. I didn't know whether you were going to mention disability or not, so I wanted to leave that open to you. But I mean, you live a life. You've done the I can't remember how to pronounce it. Is it the Camino?
Camino, yeah, I've done it twice. Well, I've done parts of it twice with my brothers.
And you've been in a chair.
Yeah. I'm 53 now, and I went into the chair permanently. I was using it all my life, but I went into it permanently when I was 13, so 40 years actually.
So when I think of you, that's not what comes to mind, right? What comes to mind is all your qualities, and then that is like a wow, and there's that, right? Is that how you see yours? I mean, have you moved away? Because were you quite active in the sort of activism space or the advocacy space? Would that be
not initially, but laterally? I did some work with the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission on one of their disability advisory committee for 6 years, and that ended last year. But that hadn't ever been really a focus for me growing up. It was because my brothers. I think I was very fortunate in that I was born in the early 70s in rural Ireland, in rural west of Ireland. So, and both my brothers don't have disabilities, and so the special schools and things, maybe they were there, but it was never really a question because I just went to the school down the road with my brothers and with everybody else. We just got on with it. And, my parents are instrumental in the whole thing, because there was never a question of me being treated any different. It was just we'll see how it's a question of if. It's not a question of, or can we make it work? It's how do we make it work? And it's been the way my whole family really work, really forever. Still do.
I find it incredibly inspiring. It's like the positive cherry on the cake, right? In terms of all that you offer. So your family saw you as Gary.
Yeah.
And there was additional challenges. Right?
And there was additional challenges that we just got on with. And because as I said, I spent a chunk of time in hospital when I was younger, and I was Gary from Roscommon, the guy in the wheelchair from At the Road. That was, and when I was in secondary school, I was in a normal Christian Brothers school. And, for 4 of those 6 years I was there, I was in the bottom floor of the school, in classrooms in the bottom floor. But in the last 2 years, I was upstairs. And so what did that mean? Well, that meant we just got on with it. There'd be 4 guys downstairs, 4 of my classmates downstairs every morning. So we'd carry me upstairs and then down again at lunchtime and then back up again. And that's just what we did. And that didn't seem unusual. And nowadays it's different, and thankfully it is. But the thing that I think one of my brothers said to me, it's, I think if you talk to most people that were disabled, and you mention inspiring, they'll all roll their eyes. And but it took me a long time to really come to terms with that, and I probably still haven't to a degree. But my brother said to me once, he said, if someone finds you inspiring, it's none of your business.
Yeah.
And which I found it, that quite a profound statement, or it kind of unlocked something for me. I kind of let it go then.
Well, as long as you don't find it some sort of insult, right?
Yeah. Well, look, I don't know, because I know it's said, and I know it's said from a good place, and from a and when it is kind of in the inspiring, when it's said in that kind of maybe slightly condescending, slightly patronizing way, I just said that's fine. It's coming from a good place. But when it's said like you're saying it from a kind of from a capacity point of view and from a professional point of view, then it's a massive compliment.
Well, when I review this, and if it sounds condescending, I'm going to cut it out. Get it out.
It didn't. Take it from me.
But it comes down then to this idea of agency.
Yeah.
Right. And we are thrown into the world, I believe, into a set of conditions that we don't well, Buddhists might say you choose the life, but in theory, we are thrown into a set of conditions. You've already made the demarcation with West Ireland. You might want to quantify what that difference is. But so you've got that. We've got embodiment. The physical. We've got our developmental history, trauma, social embeddedness, unconscious conflict, structural constraints. Right. So I put all that under the term radical agency. Right. So a lot of people talk about agency, and I could refer to it as a Sartrean bypass. It's like, oh, why aren't you making the choice? Why don't you just choose to give up alcohol? Right. But there's a Sartrean bypass, which it leaves out all those things. Right. That sometimes aren't quite in view. So if you take the link with trauma, someone feels overwhelmed, and they have this pattern where they just turn to alcohol. Right. To me, that's not true agency, because they're not fully aware of the connection. Right. Once they've made the connection, once those two things come into awareness, then they can make an informed choice. So I could be wrongly convicted and sent to prison. Right. I am within a set of conditions. My freedom is limited by those conditions, but I can choose what to do within it. I could choose to do drugs and join a gang, or I could choose to go to the prison library and exercise and read up on law to try and right. What are your thoughts when it comes down to agency and alcohol? Because I think this is where the 12-step group and the alcohol-free group diverge, and also the model of the disease model relates very much to the mental health world. Is this a disease that I'm with for life, or is there much more agency in here than we've been told?
I have really, really strong views on this, and probably makes me, if I'm good at my job, it probably makes me as good at my job because of this views that I have, which aren't unique to me, but I really hold them strongly. Is that you mentioned earlier on? You mentioned two things earlier on. You mentioned this walk of shame idea, but you also mentioned when you're in a group with me, or when I'm in a group, there's no judgment. Now, one of the things that, you're 2 years alcohol free now, and I'm a bunch of time, but before, or you're into your second year, and I'm coming up on my bunch of time. And one of the things that is true for both of us is that this isn't our first rodeo. And that I went from, as I said, it was in the mid-90s when I potentially thought, this is just not sitting well with me. And, but I didn't think there was, this is what you're supposed to do. Now, so I suppose it's a long way of saying, when it doesn't go right for someone, I'm always inviting and always pushing and always challenging curiosity. And curiosity is kind of one of those words, it's a bit of a buzzword these days, but that's the key. And so when somebody can get curious and not judgmental on themselves, and that's the thing that I will hold dearly and I will push on, is that, okay, let's just put this, just stop being judgmental for a second, and we put that aside for a second and go, okay, what could we do differently? And actually, and the power, I think, in the work that where we met is in this other person maybe seeing, hold on a sec, this isn't catastrophic. This isn't, I can go again. And then when they go again and actually get a little bit further down the road, and then maybe it goes sideways again. Okay, all right, we've got a bit more learning. We go again.
So to be clear, what you're referring to is if people decide, I want to be alcohol free, and then for whatever happens, they drink again. It's you're saying that's not catastrophic. If it's approached from the point of view of, no, this you've achieved something here, and now you're going to keep going.
Yeah, and it links directly into agency because eventually, if we keep holding that space, or keep being with them and keep believing in them, unconditionally believing that they can get to where they want to get to, unconditionally, regardless of what they think, then if it comes a time with persistence that they actually, and they will have in their way, they will have that same experience of waking up and going, hold on a sec. I can actually do this. And that's where agency, to me, kicks up several notches because, and this is something, that came up for me earlier on as you were saying, you were talking, is that quite often, and maybe you find this, maybe you don't, is that the alcohol is the easy bit. Like when we get that and you put that back there, and now you're moving on to you're giving it, you've got a week or two on your belt. You actually got the momentum. You're waking up and every morning you've got energy, you've got clarity. Okay, now what we focus on. And okay, well, maybe it's going to go sideways again. Okay, let's come back. And it's just that unconditional belief, which I see missing in other ways of doing things.
Well, I came to this conclusion that the term recovery and hope had become conspiracy theories. My understanding of the original 12-step model was it was about recovery. It wasn't indefinitely. The original wording in the big blue book was about being able to recover, right? But people get into this idea that it potentially it isn't possible. But in your mind, if somebody goes, right, I want to be alcohol free, right, and then for some reason, say 6 weeks in, that they drink again, how would you relate to the concept of agency in that situation?
Okay, well, just asking them questions of like, okay, what was that about? What do you think that was about? Rather than, and it's really critical to just, I'm almost going to say not make a big deal of it. Okay, I don't really care about the alcohol bit, that bit over there. I want to know what's going to be different. What do you think we could do differently here? I don't really want to know about the event. It's not relevant to me. And I want to know about, okay, and that's, someone I have found quite a bit that people won't, that will disarm a lot, was that people, well, you don't want to know how much I drank, you don't want to know what happened. No, not really. I want to know, what we could, what's the learning here? What do you think you might have caused it? What was the trigger? And there's always, not always, a lot of the time, there's what I will call the canary in the coal mine. Is that you have the, they were meditating for a couple of weeks, and maybe they were journaling every morning, or maybe they were doing something, and it slipped for a few days. That's the canary in the coal mine. That's the thing that we have to watch.
They stopped doing the things that sustained them.
Yeah.
So when I followed this thread, right, where I came to was ambivalence. So what I discovered with other people, and certainly myself, is if if I say I'm going to do one thing and do another, there was obviously ambivalence, right? So what I mean by that is basically I want to lose weight, but I want a slice of pizza. Right? I had this Tibetan teacher once, and he said that was the example he gave, and he said, "Remain curious," like that. That's like a sort of teaching method, and I did, and then I discovered, wow, it's all about ambivalence. So if you take the difference, I would say is I can go into a bar, and I can sit on a bar stool at the bar, and I can drink any drink in that bar. In fact, I can drink as much as I want in that bar at any time I want, but I choose not to. I can choose to drink or I can choose not to, but I choose not to. There are other people who'll come and sit at the bar stool and like, I shouldn't be in the bar. It's triggering me. I kind of like, I want to drink, but I can't really have a drink because, I have a problem and to me, the ambivalence isn't resolved. So what happens is on a daily basis, they're having that struggle. They're fighting their mind with willpower or trying to do the checks and balances, and hopefully each day one wins. But there's a hell of a lot of energy expended in the ambivalence. The other example I would give is I'm thinking about going to London or Paris for my vacation. So the energy is, Paris is great. A lot of things, croissants, London is great. I can go to Big Ben. So there's this energy, and the reason that the energy is there is because when I am ambivalent, I do not have to decide. I can hold Paris and London both. Now, the minute I decide on Paris and go all in, I can let go of London. So all the energy goes into Paris. So for me, that kind of metaphor is the same as the alcohol-free. Once I decide alcohol-free is amazing, once I realize I have choice, right? So if I drink again, it's because I choose. It's not because of trauma. It's not because of the pull of the alcohol, because there's none in my system. It's because I choose. Now, when I have worked with people and perhaps said that maybe the reason you're drinking is because you're choosing to drink, right? I find it's liberating, right? Because then they can look at any residual ambivalence. Now, to get to that point, you have to, as you rightly say, form a new habit. You have to get away from actually having that glass of wine when you come in because it's a good thing to do. In the short term, what I don't think people realize is a huge part of the reason that you want to have the glass of wine or the beer at 7:00 is because the alcohol wants you to have the beer or the wine at 7:00. You're actually detoxing. So people think, it's only an alcoholic or somebody who has serious problems with alcohol has the experience of detox. But actually what I learned was actually that craving isn't necessarily some sort of habit. There's a habit there, yes, but there's also a physical component. So I jumped around there, but there's this connection between getting away and forming new habits and getting, if you like, detoxed from a bad habit, and then really resolving the ambivalence so that we can see that we have real choice.
The ambivalence is, I think it's the thing that unlocks, once you're aware of it, and everyone that that has ever worked with me and mentioned ambivalence and said, I don't want to become ambivalent, or I don't want to become complacent. They're there because you're aware of it, and once you're aware of it, it's not going to catch you. The thing that also comes up for me as you were talking there was this whole transactional nature of alcohol, and what I mean by transactional nature is that we all talk about all the time, relatively speaking, about the cost of drinking. the cost of drinking alcohol. But what we don't talk about really that much is the cost of not drinking alcohol. And that's got a cost too. And it's absolutely the opposite, because, I might come in from, work with my 7 o'clock thing and feel my pull towards alcohol, my craving, whatever, for whatever reason, whether that be physical, whether that be habitual, or whatever it might be. There's my cost. That's it. I'm paying my cost. And so then I get my benefit and the following day with my energy, with my clarity, whatever it might be. And I think the important part for the work, that I do and I have done is to challenge people to collect that cost or collect that benefit, collect it. And so there's my benefit, there's my energy, there's my clarity. The grass is a bit greener this morning, or whatever it might be. And if we can dial into that, then I think we kind of and appreciate that. I'm not a big fan of gratitude lists, but at the same time, we use all of those concepts to pick out these wins. Then I think we kind of kill ambivalence. We can kill ambivalence.
Quick sidebar: why are you not a fan of gratitude lists?
I just think it becomes it's become a little bit like manifestation these days. Write 3 things down that you're
controversial.
Write 3 things down that you're grateful for, and it'll all be okay. But if it's, I just wish it wasn't put out there with numbers on it. Like write 10 things down you're grateful for. Write all of them there. Just if you're going to do it, write them all down. And
I'm pinning that because that's too important and exciting. I want to dive into that a little bit. So going back to you bring up something brilliant that I learned, and I think you concur with on agency. I realized that some of the great gurus in motivation and change got it wrong. So what I learned very early on was if you associate enough pain with doing the old behavior and enough pleasure with the new behavior, you can change. And I think what you highlighted was what was missing in that. There are positives for stopping alcohol and there are negatives for stopping alcohol. There are positives for drinking and there are negatives for drinking. There are four quadrants. Yeah. And if you miss any of the 4, it's like denying that alcohol can de-stress in the short term. Like if you don't acknowledge that, then it's kind of not truthful. It's really like this idea of with substances, just say no, KNOW.
Yeah.
Right. You don't go into a bunch of kids and say drugs are all bad, because it's not true. Why would people be doing them? Yeah. Right. You have to balance the danger and the positives. So in the same way, I think bringing that into awareness that there's this 4 quadrants, there's actually going to be a negative of giving up.
Yeah.
I put on weight when I eat the pizza, but God, it tastes good in the short term.
I also think that almost by a kind of a corollary of that is that it respects people's intelligence as well. Because if we're going to say that alcohol is bad, then that just makes everybody stupid for doing it. And that's not the case. There are billions and billions and billions of people who drink alcohol that are perfectly rational, intelligent people, and probably most of them actually.
Yeah, so so you can hold that. I'm holding no, it's bad.
Well, I'm just talking about what it's doing on the tin.
So it's incredible. You know what it's incredible for? I think taking the edge off socially. So if you have a bunch of people in a room, right, and they're not quite gelling, throw in a couple of drinks, and you can really warm it up really quickly. So it's not that I am all bad, but there's a lot of bad.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I will get that, and I suppose the point being is that when it gets to a place that is unhealthy, then it's just, and it doesn't mean that it doesn't work for you in those initial half an hour or whatever it is. It still does the job. So you're doing it for a reason. Now, it's not a logical reason, because logic goes out the window. It's more of a habitual kind of survival brain reason. But so yeah, it's just that it works, I suppose, is the point. To a point, to a very limited point.
I guess my whole thing is, there's one thing I wanted to try and get out of all this work in the podcast is informed choice. So I would say I was drinking alcohol and I wasn't informed of all the data, right? So it's a bit like it is a bit like licking honey off the razor's edge. Yeah, there can be great fun and things with alcohol, but you also need to know the risks, right? When I started drinking, I knew a little bit, but I didn't know this is a seriously addictive drug. It creeps up on you in ways that, Samuel Johnson said, the chains of habit are too weak to be felt until they're too strong to be broken. Nobody sets out to have a problem with alcohol.
Yeah.
Right. It's on them before kind of they realize. The other thing is, I remember being in a forensic clinic, very fancy pants in London, and they're doing this clinical meeting, and they put up all these complex cases, murder, literally murder and all this sort of stuff. And I put my hand up and said, there's a common denominator in all these cases. And oh yeah, what is it? And I said, they were all intoxicated when they committed the key index offense. And there was a bit of a murmur, and then they moved on. And they moved on because it wasn't interesting enough, but it was true. Now, I'm not saying they committed the offense because they were on alcohol, but I'm questioning whether they would have committed the offense if they hadn't been. Right? So it's a bit like the drink driving. I think there are very few people who would drink and drive if they were sober.
Yeah.
Right. It's unlike many other drugs in the terms of what people will do under their influence, that they regret, that they wake up the next morning and go, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. I'm not aware of the same thing happening on a lot of other drugs.
Yeah.
If you, not that I'm prizing one over the other, but I'm just saying it has certain properties that seem to be unique to it. Right.
And I recognize that.
I remember Timothy Leary saying, the psychedelic guy, he said, every major mistake he made in his life was under the influence of liquor.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
Very interesting. Coming from him.
Yeah. Coming from him, right? All the different, but I sort of concur. So this is a really important subject, because if people are liberated to see that they have agency and they have choice, they are empowered and potentially self-liberated. If I say to you, you have no choice because you're an alcoholic or you're an addict or you've experienced trauma, I close down the horizon for change.
Yeah.
So it's not it's not to reduce or negate suffering that people experience and the challenge they experience. It's more to bring into view that perhaps there's more choice here than you initially first realized.
Yeah. And it takes a while to get there, but it does. And it's not the first thing that arises either. It's kind of, now we need to pull ourselves out of the orbit of it first. And then, the habitual nature, the detox nature of things needs to fade, and we need to create new patterns. And what I find is, before choice and agency arises, or almost at the same time, the whole idea of disinterest in alcohol kind of begins to emerge, where you go, I don't care. It's just not a thing. Now that takes a chunk of time. It's just, and so then the question or then the statement can arise that people can say, well, actually, I can drink as much as I want whenever I want. And as I've heard before, and I just choose not to.
So I think it's really fundamental what you're saying. So it's back to this idea of it's not a bypass, right? So we are acknowledging that it's not a binary. Oh, you just choose.
Yeah,
right?
No.
What you're
got to do
saying,
the work.
There's a really, I'm putting words in your mouth, but there's a challenging process to get to the point where agency becomes clear. And I've alluded to the resolving the ambivalence. Also the other factors that could be involved in environment, embodiment, trauma, etc. Could you put a figure on it? Could you give a rough estimation of how long you think it takes the average person to move from a position of, struggling, learning, willpower, detoxing, to the point where it becomes a much clearer choice?
When I am asked that question, I'm always pulled to say somewhere between 6 months and a year. And the only reason I'm able to, I'm saying that is because it sounds reasonably doable. What I really want to say is it takes a year. And it's because, when you're actually out of the orbit, now most people will get there much sooner than that. But it's not so much about the time. Really, it's about the attitude towards, and it's going, when you take alcohol off its pedestal, if you take alcohol off its pedestal, because in dry January it's not been taken off its pedestal. The 1st of February will be, 2nd of February will be what it is. It'll be lots of hangovers and the rest of it. But if you do the work and experience and pick up the wins and pick up what you're going towards consistently over that period of time, you can do it much faster. Because I've come across several instances where people have done a year, but they've celebrated by drinking on day 366, and it is, yeah, and
I'll celebrate with a drink.
Exactly, and so that's and that's a difficult place to be, and so it's not really about the number of days, but it is in some sense in that you have to create the pattern and embed the pattern, and it doesn't take 21 days or six days or anything like that to create a habit. It takes as long as it takes. And so who was it? Huberman came up with this idea of limbic friction. Of some habits are stickier than others, and alcohol is one of the stickier ones, and at least that's where I heard it. And so but if you do the work of actually picking up the wins and not denying that alcohol is still kind of gnawing at you, but then you kind of going, I don't want to. When you get to a place where you're actually going towards something, you move alcohol from a place of I can't or I shouldn't to I don't want to. And when you're in that place, it doesn't matter what the day is, you're there.
It's strong. So I think, one of the things I learned was, and I'm giving words to what I think you said, there is a neurobiological component. But I came to neurobiology late. So in a way I put the science on top of what I kind of experienced intuitively, clinically. But I think it's incredibly important when you think of things like complex trauma. And when you think of a thing, I'm going to use the word addiction, right? Or habitual use, right? The mind is wired, it's clucking to repeat. It's wired, it's got these associations, pain, pleasure, etc., and wired to it. I think there is if you could fast forward people to a year, they would experience that has settled down. But there is a job of work to do, to transform that, to work with the neuroplasticity, where the old habit is replaced by new. In my own work with people, I don't even think of a year, right? but I would completely concur. I think something around the year mark changes of its own volition in terms of agency. Prior to that, I break it down into 3 days. Right, so this would apply to anything, right? Chocolate or cigarettes, right? So the 3 days is a real intense detox. No matter whether it's like a glass of wine every few days or a bar of chocolate, right? It's like if you've put your foot on the accelerator and take it off, there's an adjustment, right? So if you change any sort of chemical makeup, after that, my target is the 14 days. Which I call the kick. Right. So it's like, I think something happens after 14 days where you could say that there's a detox. If you think of cannabis, right? Cannabis is often still active in the system for about the 2 week mark. And then after that, I worked at like the 30 days, the 60 days, 90 days. So I think the numbers can be good milestones. Yeah. But I think that the system takes time to readjust to any abstinence if something has been done on a regular, even exercise, right? Creating the habit of exercise or losing the habit of exercise, it takes a little while before you feel the full force of that. So you could say that radical agency, it's a process of unfolding to get to the point where, I'd repeat that. If I drink alcohol, it's because I choose. If I was at the beginning of the journey and I was 3 days in or a week, I don't think I have that same binary choice. I think I'm working against habit, neurobiology, conditioning, social context, etc. And my own personal data for that is I used to do 6-month chunks. So I used to give up alcohol for 6 months at a time, mainly to lose weight. I should have said that was really my motivation. I actually enjoyed alcohol a lot, probably too much, but actually I realized I couldn't lose weight and drink. I had to make a choice. So in a way, it was a resolving of the ambivalence in that regard. It's like, I want to keep the weight off more than I want to drink. Yeah. So it's easier. But when I was in the early stages, I was competing against all those things that I mentioned. And also, that we haven't touched on, there was a self-medication, right? I didn't realize, when I stopped drinking alcohol, I was like, my energy was so intense. I actually said to a friend, I think somebody might be putting something in my food. Because I had this intensity of energy, but I realized that there was a slight neurodivergent component to that. Right, I had a mind that organized things in a particular way that had a particular energy, and I think now on reflection that there was a component of self-medication where the alcohol allowed me to kind of switch off. I would never have known that. I would never have discovered that until I had a long enough period of abstinence to really to sort out what was what. So again, I think there are a lot of people may not even know some of the underlying reasons for the motivation to turn to substances in a particular way.
The only way to kind of get that knowledge or get that is time. Is to just give yourself the chance. And I'm going to bring it back to this belief thing. Is that when the unconditional, and that's why things have worked out, the way they have for me, is that just come back. And because, the coaching books say, and I think it's the fundamental that I believed before I read it, or I intuitively believed before I read it, or before I found it, is that everybody that I work with is creative, resourceful, and whole. And I believe
creative, resourceful, and whole. I really like that.
Yeah, it's one of the cornerstones of coaching, and I think that's the thing that has that really made me, because what I do now doesn't feel like a job. I'm a full-time coach now. It just doesn't feel like a job. And I'm really fortunate to be in that position, because what I did before was great. It was brilliant. I wouldn't necessarily have changed those 30 years in the industry that I was in, but it felt like a job every day. But this doesn't. And that allows me, if to go into every conversation, whether it be about alcohol or anything else, with that same mindset every time. If it hasn't worked out, okay, go again, however long it takes.
The trick is not to give up.
Yeah.
I saw this interview once with Oprah, and she was asked, what makes somebody successful? You've seen all these people. You've had the privilege of interviewing everyone, right, from time began. What's the key component? And she didn't even breathe. She didn't even have to think. She just said, knowing what you want. Right. So I think part of the resolving ambivalence is knowing what you want and then not giving up on it. Because her point was, once you know what you want, you'll do everything that you can to get it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're ambivalent, so again, that's an underlying, you have to want it. I often talk to people about change and kind of Rocky 3, right? It's like the eye of the tiger. You have to have the same eye of the tiger to want to make the change as you did to do the other habit. And I think sometimes that's not made explicit. So I like to say to people, it's possible, but I'm not saying it's easy.
Yeah.
What might be a good moment to ask you, what's the difference between a coach in your mind and a depth psychotherapist?
With my limited knowledge of what a depth psychotherapist is, and I'm probably going to say something here that might annoy lots of psychotherapists, but the easy answer is that the psychotherapy is focused on the past, and the coach is focused on the future, and which is an easy answer, but it is quite a bland answer. And so I think the difference, I don't think there's much of a difference, to be honest with you, in terms of what the outcome is, what's the attitude here. And any good coach, any good psychotherapist, I do believe will believe and want their client, whoever is sitting in front of them, to be, let's use the cliche because I believe in it, the best version of themselves. So, and whatever way you do that, whatever conversation you have to have, whatever methodologies, tools, frameworks you have to use, or you do use, to get to support that person, because I really have a problem with the word help for some reason, is to support that person. I think it's about agency as well, actually, to get to where they want to get to. Psychotherapy, coaching, I think the modality is just a different way of getting to the better or best version of themselves. And maybe that's a fudgy answer, but I think, for a good one of either of those things, there's probably very little difference.
I think it was fair. I would say that the past isn't of interest to me as much as the presenting past, right? So it's if the past is none of my business, but if a pattern is showing up consistently, if people are repeating the same things, often there can be some sort of genesis of that in the past, and as you say, the old school would have been maybe to perhaps investigate that. That's kind of a bonus. What's more of interest to me is, what is this pattern that we can identify and can we change it? So we converge on gratitude. So I think gratitude is incredible for many, many reasons. not least of which it can cut through anxiety.
Mm.
So, if your life's going well and you start getting anxious that it could lose it all, for instance, or your life isn't going that well, both those things, I think, if you drop into gratitude, it can have a huge impact on the mind. I always tell people to start with their underwear, which usually gets a laugh, but I actually mean it. So when I talk about gratitude, I literally will go, yeah, I'm wearing clean underwear. That not everyone in the world is sitting wearing clean clothes. I'm sitting. I'm relatively safe. I'm warm. I'm fed. I find I don't need to get very far before suddenly I get perspective on my life. So many problems come from when we lose a perspective, and I think gratitude brings us back. But you're saying something about when it becomes sort of quantifiable, where you have to do a list of gratitude, and it becomes a bit of a.
And the depth is not there, and that's what annoys me. Is that why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? And the reason why we're doing it, and you mentioned the word, and I think it is the word is perspective. Is that my coach always talks about being in the basement, and in the basement there's no windows and it's all dark. You can't see anything. Get yourself up to the penthouse, and how do you do that? And try to get a bit of perspective. Now, how do you do that? Well, think about the things that you're grateful for. That the things that which is great, but leave it there. Don't say 10 things. Don't say 5 things. Just any of them. Just as much as it takes. But the other problem I have, and it's the same problem I have with manifestation, is the implicit message that that's it. You just write a gratitude list and write what you want to manifest it, and there you go. That's it. Put it back, put it away, and you're there. It's part of going back to the same part of the process, part of a journey, part of the hard work when things are difficult, when you really want to drink or whatever whatever it might be, is that okay? Let's bring ourselves back. Let's bring ourselves out a bit. If you call it perspective, you can call it gratitude, you can call it whatever you want, and bring yourself out a bit. See where you are, who you are, and going back again to that creative, resourceful whole piece, which every good coach knows, and that bringing yourself back to at least considering the idea that you're as good as everybody else, which I think is something that I struggled with and still do for a long, long time.
Well, it's fascinating how many people are caring and loving and giving to others, but they can't quite give that same love and care, and especially forgiveness. I see that a lot. So people can forgive so many other people in their life, but perhaps they can't forgive themselves, and that's part of the presenting past. They're still trying to reconcile perhaps something that they have done. So manifestation's a bit of a buzzword, and I definitely didn't want to get into the woo-woo on the show, but it's worth talking about because I have 2 different takes on this. I think there's manifestation where I'm thinking of leaving my job to be a coach, right? And then I decide I'm going to do it. I'm going to leave and I'm going to be a coach. And then suddenly somebody offers me an office space really cheap that I didn't know was there, nearly like out of the blue, right? So you can say it kind of manifested. My view on that is it's always there, right? But we're never going to come across it until we move out or we move towards what we want to do. I think that's different from this idea of I want to be a coach, so I'm just going to wish it and it happens. Now, I feel it's somewhere in between. So I don't know whether you've ever tried that writing down 10 things that you would like and putting it in an envelope and putting it away. I do it nearly every year. If I'm on a vacation and I'm in a hotel that's got stationery, I always write a letter to myself about the things that I would like to change. And I date it in a year's time. And nearly always that I achieved the things that I wanted. Now, some people might say, you're manifesting that because you just wrote it down. I think I'm bringing it into consciousness and awareness and manifesting it in a physical form, i.e. I'm writing it down. But what do you come across this a lot with people, and do you think that affects their agency?
I do. I come across it a lot on my own, and I was lucky. I'll answer it by saying I was in the early, when I got into personal development properly first, really started digging into it, was probably in the early 90s. And the first set of tapes, if we remember those things, that I listened to was a guy called Lou Tice from Seattle, and he's dead now, but he taught me this idea when I listened to it of this part of the brain called the reticular activating system. And whereas if you're looking for a parking space, you're going to see it. If you're looking for a red car, you're going to see it. And if you're looking for an office space, you're going to find it. And it's basically that if you're switched on to what you want. So I'm going to go back to Oprah, and I think she's dead right. You have to know what you want. And nowhere there is the word manifestation, but it's the same thing. Is that if it works for you to write it down, absolutely, go for it. And I wanted to, and I could say now that in some ways I've done it, in that I have, I wanted to learn for a living, and that's kind of what I do now. And and I wanted to support people for a living, and I didn't know I wanted to do that, but that's what I do now. How did I do it? I maybe manifested it, but I kind of was open. I saw the opportunities.
Open. It's important.
Yeah.
Openness.
And
open to the possibilities.
But I'm not answering the question you asked. Does it impact people's agency? Well, it kind of does, because I see it because, when people get that chunk of time under their belt of abstinence, whatever it might be, then they can see that, and they, I think, almost automatically become more open to things happening. Conversations happening, people being drawn towards them that previously they might have been a bit closed off to, and conversations happening, and then suddenly things start to happen. It seems like suddenly, but it isn't really. Like, it's just and it also slightly plays into this whole idea, which is getting worse and worse and worse in the world we live in, and being rushed to being. I didn't change my relationship with alcohol until I was 45. I'm 53 now, and I didn't change my career entirely from part-time coaching into full-time coaching until I was 50. And so the work I do mostly now is working with people in that middle spot of life who are kind of going, is this it? And I am absolutely, I hate the word passionate, but I'm going to use it anyway, passionate about, we're getting going, you and me. We're just getting started. And so once people see that, and once they, get the belief in themselves, then that they can change, doesn't matter what age they are. Really doesn't. I work very few.
Never too late.
Never. And I work with very, very few, relatively speaking. I work with very few younger people. Well, people would be around my demographic, 40s and 50s. And thankfully now there's a much larger and growing movement about, if you want to call it midlife crisis, go ahead, but bring it on.
Well, it's not discussed. A lot of these things become a cliche, but it's a very, very real thing. So a bugbear I have is we don't talk about life stages enough. We don't talk about the difference in energy between a 30-year-old and a 40-year-old. We don't talk about what it's like to be young and very attractive and then suddenly be middle-aged and not attractive, an identity change. We don't talk about what it's like if we have kids when they move from little gorgeous cuddly toddlers to hunking teenagers, right? There's a loss and there's a transition, and we don't seem to have the time or space to talk about it and embrace it enough, which is fascinating. Earlier, did you say Oprah was dead on?
Yeah, I did.
I thought you said Oprah's dead. So
she's spot on.
Need to clarify that.
She's spot on.
She's spot on. Yeah, dead on. That's an Irish expression, isn't it? So, I'm sure there were things that slipped by me that were really important that you said. But if somebody was listening, right? So I think we're both saying, you drink, enjoy it, right? But if you wanted to experience alcohol free, there's definitely things to learn about how to do that and how to do it well. And there's certainly huge, exciting, wonderful benefits from experiencing that. If somebody was kind of listening, where would you say is a good place to start?
I would say start with the chunk of time and give yourself whatever if work backwards from something that scares you to something that is slightly uncomfortable. Like it might be 28 days scares the life out of you. But okay, well, 14, how does that sound? Well, that's too scary. Well, okay, 7. Start with that. And during that time, get a journal and write down how you're feeling. And pick out what's better every morning, every day. What's better? What's better today than it was the morning you woke up when you were drinking? And write down, what do you want? What do you want? Because what you'll get away from is all those things that alcohol was causing. Or all those, work, family, all that stuff. You'll get away from that. But as quickly as possible, what are you going to go towards? And also recognizing the transactional nature of both of those 4 quadrants you talked about. There will be a downside to not drinking. Let's accept that. And let's accept as well that life's not going to change overnight. It's we've got a life to live, and you're a whole person. So just because maybe alcohol goes in the backseat or maybe eliminated entirely, then it doesn't mean life's going to be brilliant. There's more work to do. But that's the way to sustainability. When you're talking about a break, I think the real important word here is sustainability. Is that we want a sustainable change in our relationship with alcohol, not a month, which isn't, a month, but not a dry January month where it's kind of like close your eyes, hold your nose, and you're at the end of January. So, just concentrating on, okay, what could be better? And it's not going to be huge tomorrow, but it'll be something. And it won't be big the day after that, but it'll be something more. And so, and if it doesn't go right, which maybe it won't, okay, what could you do differently? And do it again, and do it again, and do it again, and do it again. And, because I'll say it again, that there's no difference between me and anyone I've ever worked with in terms of their capacity or their ability to get where they want to get to. None.
So your book's not out yet. In the absence of that, what book is there? One book you go, this is a great book to start with. What would you recommend?
In the alcohol space, is it?
Yeah.
I like the one that comes to mind is This Naked Mind from Annie Grace.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
Yeah,
it's a game changer, I think.
Yeah.
That I find the what is it? It's not
This Naked Mind. Sorry.
No.
Quit Lit. Yeah, Quit Lit. Yeah.
Quit Lit. Right. I found some of that really helpful. Some of it's like, some of it's like, wow. And the Naked Mind book I thought was really well written and inspiring. Maybe we should get her on the show.
Yeah.
So listen, you've been very, very generous with your time. We obviously will edit it down a little bit. Is there anything that I should have asked you, or anything that we have talked about in the past that you think I've really missed?
That'll come to me in 10 minutes' time. Not now, though. No, but it's been a great conversation. So
yeah, it's so good to see you. How if people wanted to get in touch with you, to reach out to you in your capacity as a coach, how would they do that?
GaryAllen.ie.
GaryAllen.ie. That's easy. Well, in the show notes, I'll put in your contact details.
My email address is hello@GaryAllen.ie.
Oh, I'll never give that out on air. I'm only joking. It'll be fine. No, so in the show notes, I'll put the link, and I'll put the name of that book. But it's been an absolute pleasure, as it always is, to see you. And I hope things go well for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll touch base again in the not too distant future.
Yeah, we'll cross paths. So it was as it always is. You said a great conversation. So it was it's always nice to see you. So thank you for having me.
Thanks, Gary. Absolutely pleasure.
Bye bye.